Welcome to the NYSCA FY26 webinar on our Support for Artists opportunity. Today's webinar will be hosted by myself, Program Director Christine Leahy, and my colleague, Program Director Arian Blanco.
Great to be here.
Support for Artists is one of the 4 opportunities that are currently open. Please note that our capital opportunity will open later in the fall. Guidelines for all 4 opportunities can be found on our website. And we are very grateful to Governor Hochul and the New York State Legislature for the $162 million investment in the arts that makes these grant opportunities possible. The first thing that needs to be taken care of before any Support for Artists application or any other opportunity moves forward is a statewide requirement that's called pre-qualification. If your organization has applied in Support for Artists before or any other category, you are already familiar with pre-qualification. Nonprofit applicants are required to get pre-qualified to assure that they're fit to do business with New York State. This process happens in the Statewide Financial System, or SFS portal. Please note it's a different portal than our application portal. Again, SFS is a statewide system. Do not delay taking care of this. If you're new to pre-qualification, you'll be asked to provide a lot of information, so please start as soon as possible. And if you're returning, remember that pre-qualification expires annually, and you do have to update a few documents every year. You must do this, otherwise you're not eligible. Your application won't move forward. And it is, in this category, the sponsor's responsibility to check the date that their pre-qualification expires. There is some help for all aspects of the pre-qualification process. If you're having any login trouble with SFS, you can email their help desk at sfs.ny.gov. If you have any other technical questions regarding pre-qualification, you can contact our team at prequal@arts.ny.gov. If your question is kind of more general, you can also go to help@arts.ny.gov. And then on our website, we've got a great webinar just about pre-qualification that is there now, and it will walk you through everything you need to know about this requirement. So here's our timeline for the application cycle. Our guidelines and application system are up and open, and you've got everything you need to get started to meet the June 26th deadline. Please note that this date is hard and fast. There are no exceptions.
And now for the crux of this particular presentation, speaking to our NYSCA Support for Artists opportunity. As an overview, for FY26, artists may apply for creative grants to NYSCA from the following artistic areas. They include choreographer commissions, composer compositions, film, media, and new technology, folk and traditional arts, interdisciplinary, literature, theater commission, as well as visual arts. Please keep in mind that the area you select will determine which peer panel will review your opportunity, your request, and also what support materials specifically will be required, as they vary from artistic area to artistic area. If you're successful, an award will be $10,000. While no matching amount is required, if the applicant proposes work that will require more resources than the grant can offer, the applicant should explain in their application how they will be able to complete that work financially. Applicant artists must be 18 years or older and a New York State resident as of the application deadline. We fund a year out, meaning that applications made in this grant cycle in 2025 will be for creative activities occurring next year in 2026. For questions, specific questions, please contact program staff in the funding area most aligned with the artistic work that you're applying for. And there's our contact list there. Funding priorities. New York State Council on the Arts is committed to providing opportunities for artists at all stages in their careers to continue to develop and present their work. NYSCA Supports for Artists seeks to enhance the vibrant and diverse artistic voices of New York State-based art makers, invest in projects that represent significant growth in the artistic development of individual artists, and strengthen the relationships between individual artists and artistic goals and missions of sponsoring or commissioning organizations as applicable. With respect to these opportunities, these are what we call sponsored requests, which means that as an artist, you in order to apply, you need to work with a sponsoring organization that submits the application on your behalf. And this relationship is a two-way street. So in this slide, we're going over the sponsored artist, or as the artist, your responsibilities and things to keep in mind. Work with the sponsoring organization regarding the submission of the application and completion of all required reporting as needed. Develop and supply the sponsor organization with a completed application narrative and any relevant support materials, including proof of residency. Ensure that the letter of agreement between the artist and the sponsor organization is completed and signed. Keep yourselves appraised of all NYSCA and sponsoring organization deadlines. And keep in mind that NYSCA has their own deadline, and oftentimes the sponsoring organization may have an earlier deadline because they need the time to get those materials that you provided into the online grant platform. Provide proper NYSCA credit upon receiving your grant. So if you're successful, you want to make sure that you provide NYSCA credit where credit is due. And also keep in mind, finally, that artists, they must offer a public program relating to the funded project, serving on New York State audiences during the grant period. As this is a creative grant and not a production grant, this can be a single presentation of a work in progress version, or it can be an artist talk back about the creative process for the funded project. It could be, and that could occur in person or online, or other publicly accessible program relating to the funded project. And finally, do keep in mind that artistic control of the proprietary rights to any supported project rest exclusively with the artist.
Our agency does not give grants directly to individuals. Therefore, the sponsoring organization is essential in this opportunity. Sponsoring organizations can be nonprofit organizations. They can be federally recognized Native American tribes, or they can be local New York State municipalities. These entities will receive the funds if the application is successful, and then relay those funds to the individual artist. We require that a letter agreement be executed to spell out the relationship between sponsor and artist and the payment schedule. When sponsors take on this responsibility, they have to vouch for the eligibility of the artist. It is okay for the sponsor to simply facilitate the application and disperse the funds. But it's also okay if the sponsor provides additional services, like financial or administrative services, and those are arranged separately. Also, please note that if your organization is not a service organization, and most organizations that receive NYSCA funds are not service organizations. So if this is the case, you may only sponsor one artist in each of the 8 opportunity areas under support for artists. So for example, one in visual arts, one in composer commissions, etc. If you work for a service organization, your service organization may sponsor multiple artists under each of those areas. Some people ask, okay, well, what is a service organization? Generally, those organizations do discuss being a service organization in their mission, and more than 50% of their budget goes to providing services, not programs. So for example, exhibitions, productions, workshops, those are programs. They're not services such as technical assistance or professional development that are provided for artists. If you're unsure, just check with staff. So when it comes time to fill out the application, the sponsor is doing everything in terms of interfacing with our application system. The first section will be info all about your organization. We consider these the registration questions. If you've applied before, you can have some of this auto-populate. You can see pages 15 and 16 of our support for artists guidelines to know what goes here. Next up, you'll have a series of short questions about the request and the artist itself. Again, it's filled out by the sponsoring organization, but they pertain to the sponsored artist and the project. So you will verify that the lead artist named in the application is a New York State resident, that person is not a board member or in an artistic or administrative leadership position at the sponsoring organization. You'll verify that this person did not apply last year because there is a one-year sit-out rule. If they applied last year, whether or not they were funded, they may not apply again this year. There is basic contact info for the artist, their name, address, email, phone. You'll provide the project's title. For example, An Amazing Artist is the title of the work, and then a short description, such as An Amazing Artist is a new novel. It's the second novel created by so-and-so, and on, but just a couple sentences. Please note and remember, funded projects will be $10,000 awards, and sponsoring organizations may take an administrative fee of up to, not beyond $500 if the project is funded. So they will list the amount of fee, if any. If they're not taking the fee, they would put 0. And then the last very important part of this section is selecting the artistic area from a drop-down box. So for example, you would select visual arts or choreography commissions or literature, and then further they'll select subgenres, such as if they selected literature, they would then pick fiction, poetry, creative nonfiction, etc.
Now, in terms of the actual application that the artist, or the sponsored artist should put together, it begins with answering our narrative application questions themselves. There is no template or like text boxes. You basically want to answer each of the bullets here listed as part of a narrative essay that you create on a blank piece of paper or document. Right. So again, this is the first part of your application packet that you as the lead artist and of course in consultation with key collaborators, if there are any, you want to fill out. The first bullet includes, please note, it's no more than 10,000 characters. Sorry, it does not include spaces, but it does include periods and special characters as well. The first is the title of the project, and it should match the title of the project you gave your sponsor organization that they used to put in the application portal. The next bullet is you want to describe the project for which you're seeking the support for, including details of how the new creative work will be done or what parts of the creative work will be done in 2026, the funding year in this case, right? So this is basically your synopsis. And the creative work you'll be doing towards that stated project. The next one is you want to provide a statement written by the lead artist describing their distinctive vision, stylistic, thematic qualities to be expressed in the proposed work. Include specific context about how the proposed project builds on similar work in your field or as it relates to your artistic trajectory. Explain each of the work samples. Part of each application will require the submission of a variety of different work samples. So whatever the case might be, you want to explain in this narrative, why these work samples are in this proposal. What's the relationship between the submitted work samples and the proposed project? You want to note any stylistic or technical elements that are directly related to the proposed project, or when there's a departure from the proposed project. Be sure to articulate why these work samples are being included in the application. If the proposed project represents a new direction or departure from past work, as demonstrated in the work samples, you should also discuss this. The next bullet is you want to highlight how the individual, or in the case of a team, you possess the relevant experience to creatively lead the proposed project. Again, this is where you want to really speak to, in cases where it's a team project, your key collaborators, and not only what experiences they have towards, sort of being successful in completing this project, but how you plan to work together. And finally, you want to define the project's intended audiences and detail, in particular, any aspects of the project which will be made accessible to audiences in the funding year, in this case, 2026, again, as applicable. Okay, so in addition to the narrative component to the application, is what you want to include what we call the application support materials. Now, every artistic area has specific set of support materials that are required. All of them, regardless of artistic area, will include the narrative portion of your packet, of your application, right, that you develop. But in addition to that, you want to include things like resumes, which is across the board as well, of the lead artist, of course. And if it's a collaborative project, your key collaborators. If it's a large group, we ask that it be no more than 5 total resumes, the lead artist and 4 key collaborators. And again, these various support materials, you want to put them together into a single multi-page PDF. Continuing, very often we're going to ask for media samples of different varieties, whether it's audio, visual, both. In those cases, you can't upload actual media samples to our platform. What you do is you create a links page. Again, blank piece of paper, you can title it links page, and that's where you would provide links to these support materials that you need to make sure they stay viable and available to us through the end of this year for a deliberation process. Also, we ask that they not be password protected. They can certainly be a private link that's accessible with anyone with the link. And on that links page, you want to include the link, of course, but also additional descriptor information, again, separate from the general application that you're filling out, the narrative that you're filling out, but things like the dates that it was made, key members of the team, and other critical information. Most of the time, in fact, all the times, we have like a time limit for how long a media sample can be. In those cases, either you give us a sample that's basically edited to that time. But if it's a longer sample, you can certainly include that, but you should tell us like from what minute to what minute we should view. If we don't get any directions, we're just going to view the allotted time from the beginning, and that's it. Again, keep in mind that some materials are required while others are optional, okay? So again, that will vary from grant opportunity to grant opportunity within the different artistic disciplines. And new to this year, we are prescribing a template for your letter of agreement, your sponsorship letter of agreement, okay? And on our guidelines, we have a link so you can access it, and it's to be filled out and then signed by the lead artist and a representative of the sponsoring organization. This document will be uploaded by itself under a separate upload. So again, new to this year, we have 2 uploads. One is for the lead artist or the application packet, and the other one is for the letter of agreement. By all means, please make sure that gets filled out and signed, as it is required of all applicants. And we don't want to disqualify anyone for not submitting that material as well. How is my application evaluated? How is your application evaluated? Again, the NYSCA support for artist grants are assessed under one all-encompassing criterion of creativity. Our panelists will consider application questions and supporting materials to determine a single rating of 5.0 to 0 for each application. Keep in mind that any application scoring a 2 and below will not be eligible for support. Just for context, we have a peer panelist review process. If you apply under dance choreography, it would be a peer panel of folks with expertise in the area of dance that will deliberate on those requests. Each request is viewed by a group of panels of 5 to 7, at least 5 to 7. Panelists will review each of these requests on their own, provide notes, and a rating. Once all the reviews are in by all the panelists, we then add up the individual ratings and scores and have an aggregate score. So this initial list, is something we use during a Zoom meeting that we call the panelists to have to review these scores that they did on their own, but now as a group. And in this meeting, we do allow for especially differences of opinion to be aired out. In some cases, there's rescoring. And once those deliberations and those discussions are concluded, we have our final scoring or rating sheet. And that's what constitutes the overall score that we use to determine funding. What are the panelists looking at? In every case, clear artistic vision, demonstrating the creation of the new work, relevance to the artistic development of the artist, significance, distinctiveness, and innovative qualities of the proposed project, creative contributions to the discipline, viability of the project's prospect for completion, and again, a relationship and suitability of the project to the artistic goals and mission of the commissioning or presenting organization as applicable. And what we mean by that is, oftentimes the sponsor organization may be tied to the artist in some way to produce or present that proposed work. A clear example would be a theater company sponsoring a playwright to write a new play that they plan to produce. Great. But other times, it's what we call a self-directed artist request, where the artist is acting as as the producer themselves. They're self-producing it. So either camp is welcome to apply, and that's what you want to discuss in that sort of last bullet there as part of what the panel looks at. Next slide. And this is our rating guide, our scoring guide. 0 at the bottom is usually reserved for applications that have material lapses, like they didn't answer the question, they didn't provide required support materials. The artist may otherwise not be qualified for whatever reason, and that's where the 0 lies. And as you go from 1 to 5, you get closer and closer to meeting or exceeding, as you can see in number 5, meets or exceeds all benchmarks that were articulated in the previous slide. Next slide. How is my application evaluated? Each year, panelists play a key role in NYSCA grant making. NYSCA selects a diverse group of professionals from across the state to fulfill the advisory panelist role. Panelist expertise spans a range of artistic practices as well as many facets of nonprofit management. Advisory panelists must demonstrate expertise in at least one of NYSCA's evaluation criteria. NYSCA is currently seeking panelists from all 10 regions of the state. All FY26 panelists will be conducted virtually, and selection process and requirements, nominations are due by June 26 to be considered for panel service in this year. So while we do accept panel submissions on a rolling basis throughout the year, if you'd like to serve as a panelist or know someone that'd like to serve as a panelist, if they can get their materials in to be considered by June 26th, they can serve this year. You can even nominate yourself, and of course, the really streamlined materials that's required to submit for consideration is on our website there at arts.ny.gov/panelists. And specifically, if you want to serve as a support for artists panelist, please indicate on the form support for artists. Check that, and then your second check could be the specific artistic area that you have expertise in. Next slide. Now, for our frequently asked questions segment here, we're gonna be working together, Christine and I, where we're gonna be asking the questions back and forth to each other. And hopefully we're going to get them all right because they're here in front of us. So Christine, how do I register as an artist in order to apply?
You don't register as an artist. Remember, all artists must apply with a fiscal sponsor. And so artists do not interact with the grant portal. Their fiscal sponsor will submit everything that's part of the application on the artist's behalf. And Arian, now that I know this, how as an artist can I find a fiscal sponsor?
Great question. While NYSCA does not pair artists with fiscal sponsors, we can say that anyone can look through our past NYSCA funded list to see organizations that have successfully served as fiscal sponsors in previous years. And it's a long link, but there it is. It is on our website, our sort of like database of funded past grantees. There's different filters. My suggestion is select, it's called individual artists. So this way you get a curated list, a filtered list of those organizations that funded or sponsored artists in the past. That being said, just keep in mind a few things. Any organization that's pre-qualified, whether they're artistic or not, can serve as a fiscal sponsor on behalf of an artist. And any organization that's qualified anywhere in the state can be a fiscal sponsor for any artist that lives anywhere in the state. So it's not like you're tied as an artist to find an organization within your area specifically. So I do encourage artists to think about organizations that they've worked with that might serve in this role that they already have a relationship with, again, whether they're artistic or not. Next question is, I have a multi-year grant as an administrator, Christine, with NYSCA, or I might be applying this year. Can I still serve as a fiscal sponsor for an artist? I really don't want to ruin my chances at my organizational grant.
Yes, absolutely. Sponsoring an artist is not going to interfere or preclude you from submitting that support for organizations grant or from receiving your multi-year award. Remember, these support for artists grants are entirely for the artist. They're not to support your organization, so totally separate, and you may absolutely sponsor an artist as well as applying for and receiving support for organizations. Let's go on to the next slide and the next question. Okay, if I'm on the board of an organization or I'm on the staff in a leadership role, can this organization serve as my fiscal sponsor to apply in this category?
Short answer, no. And the reason for that is given that the sponsor organization acts as the custodian of the grant, it can potentially constitute a conflict of interest should the grantee be currently on the board or on an artistic administrative staff leadership role. Now, that being said, if you are, say, a part-time usher for the organization, that wouldn't necessarily be an issue. If you were like a lighting designer and you worked as a consultant on a previous project, that's not necessarily an issue. My suggestion is if you are currently paid by the organization that you're looking to sponsor you, reach out to NYSCA staff so we can suss out your specific situation to make sure that it's not an eligibility issue, right? So the next question is, Christine, I applied last year under support for artist opportunity. And can I apply again this year? I could really use the money.
No, unfortunately, you cannot. We have what's called the sit-out rule, which means if you applied last year, whether your proposal was funded or not, you may not apply this year. Okay, next question, Arian. Can grant funding be paid to an artist's LLC? So say I'm a sponsor and my artist, Jane Doe, has requested that the grant be paid to Jane Doe's LLC instead of to Jane Doe. Is this okay?
No. And just keep in mind that these grants are considered earned income and are to be paid to the lead artist named in the application as a creative fee. Also, the fiscal sponsor will then be responsible to issue a 1099 IRS tax form as appropriate. And so to keep it really clean, and for the sake of ease of reporting for the sponsoring organization, that's the way it needs to be transacted, where the sponsoring organization pays it to the artist that's the lead artist named in the application as a creative fee. That being said, once the artist receives the funds, they can deploy it however they want. How they use the funds after receiving it as a creative fee, right, for doing the work of that they proposed is outside the scope of the grant. Speaking of which, Christine, so then what are eligible expenses for this grant?
Another great question. So remember, the grant is a creative fee. So once the funds are received by the artist, they can use them to cover whatever will be helpful in them doing the project. They do not have to itemize expenses and then report them back. When they submit information for the final report, they're going to discuss their accomplishments on their creative project, but they're not going to say, you know, I rented studio space or I bought a new laptop or whatever. So they don't have to worry about that, essentially. Please remember, if you're a sponsor, that funding through this category does not support organizational programmatic expenses. This is all for the artist. So some of this award cannot be, you know, funneled into promotional expenses for a related production, for example. So that is one restriction. And speaking of payment and funds, what is the payment schedule for the artist?
Great question. Keep in mind that the award, should there be one, is issued to the sponsoring organization. And once received by the sponsoring organization, the specific payment schedule is worked out between the sponsor organization and the artist, ideally beforehand, typically via the sponsorship letter of agreement that's drawn up. Regardless of payment schedule that's agreed to, and again, it could be lump sum once the money is received, it could be quarterly over time for the year, the funding year, it could be based on agreed to deliverables that as the artist delivers certain elements that the payment is queued up in some way. But that being said, at the end of the funding year, it must be paid in full to the artist. There is no rollover of the funds where the sponsor organization kind of keeps it into next year. They need to show that they paid it as a creative fee. Again, the grant is $10,000. And keep in mind that the organization can keep up to $500 as an administrative fee. So in most cases, $9,500 needs to be shown as a creative fee paid to the artist by year's end or the end of the contract. Christine, we've completed the project. Thank you, NYSCA, for the grant. What are some of the required elements for a final report?
Okay, the final report will be submitted by the sponsor 60 days after the end of the project period. So that's going to be February 2027. The report will ask for a brief narrative talking about the project, the creative project, the progress on that, as well as the public sharing element. So remember that the project does not have to be done. Sometimes it takes longer than a year to complete a project, but progress does have to have been made, that's substantive, and it is a requirement that there's some sort of public sharing that happens for New York State audiences. Remember, this can be like sharing of a work in progress or Q&A or something like that. The sponsor will also have to detail how the funds were spent, and it's 2 categories only. They have to show the sponsor fee, if applicable, of up to $500. That goes under a line called Other Expenses. And then the balance of $9,500 will go under Outside Fees and Services, showing that it went to the artist. And if the artist got the full award, then the full award would go there. So again, the sponsor is just justifying sufficient creative activity towards the creation development of new work. And if that has happened, they can pay out the full award to the artist. And also remember that the artists themselves do not fill out the final report. It is, as with the application, the sponsor that does that, but they do need to relay all the appropriate information to their sponsor so that they can then complete this requirement. And it happens on the Smart Simple platform. Next slide. Arian, are there any other grant opportunities available for artists?
Great question. Every savvy art maker should be on the lookout for all the opportunities that might be available to them. Now, that being said, there are many opportunities out there that serve artists. This list here that we wanted to share with you, what they have in common is these particular organizations have opportunities that are in partnership with New York State Council on the Arts. So these are re-grant block grants that are available specifically for artists on this list. And oftentimes they don't require, like you do applying to us directly, a sponsor organization. You can just, as an artist, apply directly through their application process, typically more streamlined than even ours. So again, it's as you can see, some of these are for specific kinds of art forms that they're going to focus on, and others, like the NYSCA fellowships, for example, are for artists of a variety of different art forms and backgrounds that they practice. Again, it can be, don't worry about having to copy this list here on this, from this video. We have this list on our website. If you go to resources and then click on the button for support for artists, you'll see some more information along with the list and the links to these artist-specific grant opportunities. Now, once again, just to reiterate, who should I contact with questions? Again, technical questions, you can contact the following. State financial system questions, helpdesk@sfs.ny.gov. For technical questions regarding pre-qualification, you can see there prequal@arts.ny.gov. Those two apply really for the sponsoring organization, and those kinds of questions really relate to the sponsoring organization. However, for all other questions, including general application questions, help@arts.ny.gov, and you'll be routed to the proper staff member who can answer that question. For more specific opportunity-related questions, this is mostly for the artists out there, please contact our program staff in the funding area most aligned with the artistic discipline that you're applying under. And again, there is the link or the address, arts.ny.gov/contact to get our full staff list. Please, once again, keep in mind, submit any questions you might have at least 2 weeks beforehand, before the application deadline, so we're sure to answer your question completely and timely. And finally, keep in mind that we do not review written draft application materials. We're happy to answer questions, serve as a sounding board for things you might be considering or elements of an application, but we're unable to review, nor do we review drafts of full applications to provide feedback that way.
Okay, back to our timeline. Webinar week is now, and there are webinars up on our website, so please check all of them out for any categories, opportunities you might be interested in. Office hours are going to be posted soon, and you can sign up to participate in those in June to come and ask staff questions, hear what questions other applicants might have. It can be very useful. And then you can always reach out to NYSCA staff beyond the webinars and office hour sessions. Go to the contact page and see what staff is appropriate for the discipline area that you work in, and email or call them. Please also, a reminder, don't wait on pre-qualification. Take care of that first so that it is not getting in your way, even if you are a returning grantee. Thank you so much for coming to our Support for Artists webinar.